Now, let's go back to the story that topped off our programme, because it happened at the top of our programme. And welcome to the programme, Kate McCann, our political editor, who was there in the room when Nigel Farage announced he was taking over as leader of his party, but maybe more significantly, because so many people think he is the face of the party, he's running for Parliament for Clacton in this campaign. Welcome to you, Kate.
Hi, John.
Kate, so let's start with this. You asked a question, you were there, and you asked a question to Nigel Farage at that news conference.
Can I ask you if there was a particular moment? You mentioned meeting people and people saying they felt let down. Was there one interaction that really made this for you? And did you discuss it with Donald Trump? Did you seek his advice at all? And just finally, I believe you have a candidate already in Clacton, so what's going to happen to him? Thank you.
Well, yeah, no, you're right. There is a candidate in Clacton, and, you know, that's he knew for many, many months that this was a possibility. For many, many months, this was a possibility. Not a probability, but a possibility. I think it was particularly in Skegness, actually. Particularly in Skegness. There was one particular interaction in the street with a bloke, and he sort of shrugged his shoulders and said, well, okay, mate, I'm not going to give you a hard time or slag you off, but I just felt, and then the next morning I was in Ashfield with Lee Anderson, and getting the same thing. And then I got home late Saturday night and I had time to think about it. And then Sunday morning I just thought, I'm just not feeling good about this. I'm letting people down. Better to fight something that is very, very difficult, where the outcome is far from certain. Better to do that than let people down.
So that was Nigel Farage answering our Kate's question at that news conference, and she's here, as I say, Kate McCann. What are your thoughts at this moment, Kate, on what is a moment in this campaign?
Yeah, it is a real moment, John, and not just because Nigel Farage has been going back and forward on this question of whether he should stand or not for election, but because of what it means now for the rest of this general election campaign. It means Nigel Farage will be participating in those TV debates. It means he will be far, far more prominent. And it means that he will give a voice to a group of people that he says he believes don't want to vote Tory, don't want to vote Labour. And his intention, he made it very clear at this press conference, is to be the party of opposition. He doesn't believe the Tories have it in them. He thinks they are entitled, that they're too busy infighting, and actually that reform can come from behind, not win. He said Labour's already won this election, but he believes reform can be the opposition, and he thinks they will take more votes than UKIP did in 2015, millions of votes, and really essentially nip at the heels and change the tone of this election campaign. I mean, both he and Richard Tice said they want to inject some excitement into it, and I think this certainly will do that.
Yeah, and what do you make of what is now this screeching handbrake turn by Nigel Farage to throw away what he said about not standing, throw away what he said about leaving this country for America and to fight for Donald Trump, because that's where the real action is globally. He's doing none of that. He's staying here. He's going to be here for the campaign. He says it's because he's had so much pressure from people who say they need him and want him out there in front. Is it also that maybe reform would have looked as if there was a big hole there if he wasn't doing this?
I actually think it's probably all of those things. I don't think you can doubt how personally impacted Nigel Farage has been by people being disappointed in him, because that's what he was articulating there. He was saying that people who traditionally had welcomed him with open arms, cheered his name in the street, were looking at him as if they were disappointed. And actually that seems to have really struck a chord with him. But in a much bigger way than that, I suspect Nigel Farage, who is a very astute politician, has been looking at the polls, seeing that nothing is budging the Tory poll situation, and recognising that that does present an opportunity. It means that reform has a chance that it probably hasn't had for many, many years, any party actually like that, to really come in and make a dent in this Conservative Party. And this is as much about the future for the Tories as it is about Nigel Farage's ambitions to be the MP for Clacton. It is, in essence, the beginning of his campaign to take over from whatever is left of the Conservative Party at this general election. And I think that will worry a lot of Conservative MPs who look like they may well lose their seats.
Yeah, I wonder what the Conservatives can do in response to this case. We've got Maria Caulfield on the show in a very short while. I'll certainly be asking her what she makes of all of this. But already the Conservative campaign is so geared to be a core vote strategy, aiming at their most vulnerable voters, the older voters, directed at those voters who are more likely to switch over to the Reform Party if they haven't already. How can the Tory party address this? Because they've already geared their campaigning and messaging to precisely that constituency.
Yeah, they have. And I've got an immediate answer for you, John, because I've just had a text from a Conservative Party spokesman who says Nigel Farage risks handing Keir Starmer a blank cheque to rejoin the EU, impose the retirement tax on pensioners and hike taxes on hardworking Brits up and down the UK. It goes on at length to say that Farage and Reform will not win any seats, but they will hand seats over to Labour.
Well, I'm obviously delighted, as all Reform UK members and supporters are. It's great news, and I'm quite a close friend of Nigel, and I've been involved with him for about the last 10 to 15 years. As you know, I've been campaigning for motorists in my Fairfield UK campaign, and he's been an absolutely incredible supporter of that. And he's one reason why he's asked me to stand down here in Dover.
I'm John Pienaar with Times Radio Drive. We have just been hearing out of the horse's mouth, so to speak. Nigel Farage is going to be running for Parliament. He's going to be taking over as leader of the Reform Party. So a significant moment. We'll see something of a change moment in this general election campaign. Let's talk to Howard Cox now, who is Reform's parliamentary candidate down in Dover and Deal. Hello to you, Howard.
Hello, John. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you for joining us, Howard. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm obviously delighted, as all Reform UK members and supporters are. It's great news, and I'm quite a close friend of Nigel, and I've been involved with him for about the last 10 to 15 years. As you know, I've been campaigning for motorists in my Fairfield UK campaign, and he's been an absolutely incredible supporter of that. And he's one reason why he's asked me to stand down here in Dover.
Yeah, I mean, there's never been a political motive that wasn't mixed. Why do you think Nigel Farage is doing this? Why did he change his mind? I know he told us that it's by acclaim, that millions of people were telling him, sounds like a lot of conversations, that he should stand and run for Parliament. He's duly doing that. Is it also possibly, Howard, that Reform may have peaked, may already have been reaching its own glass ceiling and needed some sort of lift?
I see that in some of the media comments, etc., but it's not my experience on the ground, John. I mean, people just keep coming. When you actually talk about Reform's contract with the people, basically the manifesto about our policies, fundamentally everyone's saying, yeah, we like those. And so that's not being reported. But obviously, it's the usual thing with the first past the post system and not proportional representation. When we're 3% above Lib Dems and they're predicted to get 49 seats and we're predicted to get 0, this is the problem that people have. And there's this tactical voting issue that will come up in place. But now Nigel's in place, I think that will give us the added spur to actually move on in the polls.
Yeah, I mean, your hope is, and there have been polls which suggest that if Nigel Farage was there with you, as opposed to sort of cheering you on from the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, that it might do your opinion poll ratings a little bit of good. And that'll be your hope. And the suggestion, of course, is that look at Reform. They are nothing more than a one-man band. And there's something in that, isn't there? But maybe you don't care. Why would you?
Well, that's a bit of an insult, John. I mean, I'm involved.
Oh, I would never wish to insult you, Howard.
Thank you, John. But there's, we have 630 candidates across the country. We're standing in every seat except in Northern Ireland. And fundamentally, and I repeat again, Reform's policies are loved by most people. They're very simple, to the point, and I'm hearing the grassroots levels. I've voted Tory for 50 years. I'm 70 this year, and I have voted Tory for the last 50 years, and I've left that whole aspect of what my past in political, they have let us down big time. And that's the reason why I joined Reform.
Interestingly, wasn't it, Howard, to hear Nigel Farage tell us that he's signed up as like a footballer signing a contract at a football club for a new star player. He's signing on for 5 more years. I mean, why are you laughing? I wonder if you're laughing for the same reason that I'm wondering. I'm wondering what that actually means, because there's certainly been a lot of speculation, honest speculation, that maybe what Nigel Farage wants is to stay in the game. And if the Tory party does go down in flames, we'll be there, ready to take over, maybe inside the tent, taking over that party. What do you think?
Well, no one knows exactly what's between Nigel's ears, but really what he has always talked about is actually wants a new centre-right party.
Yeah.
And yes, and that's what it's about at the moment. That's been actually left completely. There's a massive gap there, and that's what he wants to put together. And that's where I sit. I've always sat in that area. And, both Labour and Tory, their policies are almost identical. They're a pimple on the same two backsides, to quote George Galloway's comment of a month or so back. We have to understand that the choice has to be pretty stark and pretty different. And that's why Reform UK are standing so many people right across the country.
Okay, Howard, Alicia Fitzgerald, our political correspondent, is here with me in the studio. Alicia.
Hi, Howard. I just wondered, Did you expect this to happen? Was this all part of a plan? Was it all just a bit of a publicity stunt? You know, Nigel saying, I'm not standing, I'm not going to do it. But he still remained pretty prominent in the limelight over the past few weeks, obviously launching your candidacy in Dover last week. Was this all just a big plan?
Alicia, you're very clever in these questions. I love the way you do it. Obviously, Richard and Nigel have sat together and talked about this in depth. You heard Nigel say he spent a normal day, he called it, going fishing and walking the dog and going to the pub, those sorts of things. And he genuinely is agonising over the fact that people beyond belief are asking him, please come back, represent us. You know, you got us through Brexit, but we need you to take us further and bring back that centre right's position in this country. We need you on the ground. And Richard, I must pay tribute to him. Richard Tice is phenomenal. And, you know, I'm glad he's going to be chairman of the party, and I support him wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I mean, you do wonder, just speculating aloud, I wonder what your thoughts are too, Howard, in those Tory ranks, especially on the right wing of the party, where already, as the campaign goes on, some in the Tory party are looking at the day after the general election and the drive they would make at that point, if the Tories lose, to take over the party for the right wing. Well, now they'll be saying, well, maybe Farage can be a part of that. Maybe he's the leader some of us have dreamed of. That's what they'll be thinking very quietly.
Well, I'm very close to something like 70 backbench Tory MPs, and they've been dreading this announcement today of Nigel coming back on board. And I think, watch this space, there's going to be a lot more big donors moving from the Tory side and coming to Reform UK. And I think you'll see some defections coming over to Reform UK too. So watch this space.
Why do you say that? Just I've taken a lot of your time, but why do you say defections are going to be coming your way? Have you heard that? Or is that wishful thinking?
Well, it's a bit of both, to be fair, John, but I am actually in contact with a lot of Tory backbenchers who've been massive supporters of Fair Fuel UK, and I've been instrumental in keeping fuel duty frozen for the last 14 years, as you know. And I've even introduced a thing called Pump Watch, which Claire Coutinho has taken on board. So I'm quite close to a lot of good people who are generally in the centre right. And I've been speaking to them, and and I'm not going to give anything away, but I do know some Tory backbenchers are wavering.
All right. Howard Cox, good to talk to you. Howard is the Reform UK parliamentary candidate for Dover and Deal.